One, have we been thinking about ADHD all wrong? Overdiagnosing and overprescribing stimulants. A deep dive revisit on ADHD. 2, does CNN hate America? And should a development devoted to Islam be allowed in Texas? We have that conversation with the boys from Ruthless. 3, did Babe Ruth call his shot? We discuss it with New York Yankees legend David Wells. It is the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Every Monday through Thursday at 12 o'clock Eastern Time. Set a reminder and never miss an episode of the Will Cain Show. But if you're listening on terrestrial radio, you can always subscribe and catch us in audio version at your leisure by subscribing at Apple or on Spotify. We've got a big show today with some awesome guests, Comfortably Smug, Josh Holmes, David Wells, all joining us a little bit later here on the Will Cain Show. But I want to bring the boys in from New York, Tinfoil Pat, Young Establishment James, and Two-A-Days Dan. Good morning, fellas.
What's up?
Morning, Mr. Cain.
Hello.
How many of you have at some point, and I ask this in HR and personal preference will allow you to opt out of this answer. How many of you in your life have ever been diagnosed with ADHD?
It's going to be...
I have.
2.
I
Yeah.
think it's a
2 of
Northeastern
3.
thing.
14 years old.
I was like 7.
14-year-old.
Yep.
Dan. 7, James. Diagnosed.
They knew early.
By the way, I believe it, James. I believe. Despite our conversation today, this might be an accurate diagnosis of James. You guys were diagnosed with ADHD. Did you get were you prescribed medicine?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Really?
No, and yes. One yes, one no.
Well, they did, but my mom was like, absolutely not. Like, we're doing this the natural way. I'm not putting a freaking 8-year-old on a bunch of drugs. Like, you're going to sign him, like, extra recess and make him run around and sign up for swimming, get it out of his system, which probably much better off today for that.
Interesting.
Is that all we have to do?
And Dan?
My mom was like, go for it. Pump him up with whatever you got. Let's go.
I don't think my teachers liked it, though.
And they wanted to put you on medicine, the teachers. They wanted to.
They're like, please, James's mom, please, for the love of all that's holy, put him on some medicine.
There's some good
It's
reports
just all
back
so
in the day.
believable.
It's all written.
It's all so believable. Young Establishment James. Well, I find this topic absolutely fascinating. I think everybody listening probably does, because the odds are either you or your children or somebody in your family or your friend have been diagnosed with ADHD and been prescribed stimulants, whether or not that be Ritalin or Adderall, because the numbers are quite honestly through the roof. But there is and I have to give them credit, a fascinating article in the New York Times Magazine entitled, "Have We Been Thinking About ADHD All Wrong?" It's well reported. It's, I don't know, tens of thousands of words. It took me a half hour to read, but I read slow. And sometimes I move my lips when I read. But it's well sourced. I mean, tons of doctors. I want to talk about that with you today. But I want to start with something. I want to say that I want to be incredibly sensitive when I have this conversation, because not only am I talking to two guys here who've been diagnosed with ADHD and both pursued different paths and how to treat it, but again, everyone listening, and there's probably a good percentage of people listening whose children are on some psychostimulant because of ADHD, or they themselves are on it, or at one point in their life were on it. And so it can feel fragile. It can feel personal, right? Like, oh, am I making the wrong choice for my child? Or did my parents make the wrong choice for me? Am I making wrong choices today? But I think there is no doubt that it is incredibly important. And even more so if you are diagnosed, right? It's important societally. It's even more important if it affects you or your children. And I don't believe in sacred cows. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has said that he wants an answer to the cause of autism by September. Now, I think that is an incredibly laudable goal. Is it a realistic goal? I don't know. We'll see. I was a little surprised to see the reaction to him when he said that. I saw people that I know who have personal experience with this who felt offended. Forget if you say, oh, he's crazy, but they're offended by this prospect. And I'm not sure why that would be, other than they presume he's heading you toward a path of talking about vaccines. But here's some things that we know, okay? Autism 20 years ago had a prevalence of 1 in 150 children. Today, it is 1 in 36.
Wow.
I had Dr. Drew Pinsky on the Will Cain Show yesterday. He said if you went back 30 years, 40 years, you're talking about 1 in 1,000. So incredibly rising rates of the diagnosis of autism. You can have conversations about whether or not we're better at diagnosing it if it was ignored in the past, but it is rising. As soon as I finished the Will Cain Show yesterday, all the people around the show, so makeup artists, cameramen, all want to talk about this. Why? Because this affects so many people, both of these issues. Not that they're tied to one another, but there's a similarity between autism and ADHD. And the similarity is there is a taboo against having a conversation that I think is open. We don't know the cause of autism. So for me, you close no doors. You explore every option. And if that leads you down the path of something in some vaccine or the schedule of vaccines, whatever, there are no sacred cows. That's the way to conduct science, not shutting conversation down. So when everybody came in yesterday after the Will Cain Show, they started talking about, I love this. I wish I thought it ahead of the time. One of the people just around the show said, hey, I just looked it up during the show while you were talking. Like, what is the rate of autism in other countries around the world? I said, that's fascinating. What is it? And they said, well, the one that's closest to us is Korea, South Korea. They're like 1 in 34. We're 1 in 36. But go to Europe, go to Western Europe, you're talking about 1 in 100. You know, so there's a lot of things here you can pursue about process of elimination. What are we doing that they're not doing? What are we diagnosing that they're not diagnosing? And I just think we have to have honest conversations, no sacred cows, but understanding the sensitivities of everybody who have made decisions. Maybe not all of our decisions are right. Maybe they were wrong. Maybe they were right. But you got to have an honest conversation. And I want to have an honest conversation today about ADHD. Dan.
And with autism, I feel like it just wasn't, people just weren't aware of it. I mean, shows like Love on the Spectrum, for example, people are much more aware of what autism is and how much it affects people.
I think that's true. Okay, I think that's true. But I'm going to tell you this. I'm older than you by, 15 years, 14, 13 years, in that range?
13.
So, okay, let's do a quick survey. So you and Tinfoil are the same age. James, you're 26 now? 26 or 25?
25.
Okay. All right, here's well, I think what you said is true, Dan. I would actually say that probably is more when it comes to Asperger's, the spectrum of autism, right? Where someone would have maybe in the past just been described as weird. Now people would say, oh, but he actually has a quantifiable list of conditions that you can see exist on the spectrum. But growing up, I did not. There's also the kids that are clearly far along the spectrum, like clearly not just Asperger's, but autism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anecdotally, growing up, didn't see those kids, man. Like in the 80s and 90s. It's not like those kids, like I know what a kid behaves like and kind of looks like that has autism today, right? And I can't look back on my life and go, oh man, we called that kid weird, but he probably had autism, you know, or whatever. Now we had Down syndrome. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of kids around who had Down syndrome, and now they're not. And we know the reason for that, because it has over a 90% abortion rate because they can diagnose it in the womb, and it leads to an overwhelming rate of abortion. We literally had Down syndrome kids, and now we do not. I mean, we do, but you know what I'm talking about. The numbers are way down. So here, quickly, I told you I was like, for me growing up, Tinfoil, growing up, you're 37 as well, I believe, right in that range.
30.
Did you have a lot of kids around that were autistic, and you guys think you just didn't realize it?
There might have been one kid in my kindergarten class, but outside of that, I can't think of any.
And we should say, okay, maybe they were in separate classrooms, or maybe they went to a
separate
different
class.
school, or whatever it may be. But still, you have social interactions. You know, I grew up in a small town. There's not many places that people go very different directions. All right, Dan, did you?
Yeah, there's quite a few, but I didn't know what it was called. I didn't know what it was the thing. I saw it around me. But
Okay, so you think you did encounter kids in your age range that were clearly autistic, but it wasn't diagnosed back then?
Absolutely, 100%. We just didn't know what to call it.
All right, now, and James, you're 25.
Yeah.
I would assume at your age now, you've had much more exposure to it, and you knew what it was.
That, and I think the other side of the spectrum too. Like, I think growing up, any kid who had like any little bit of rambunctious behavior, like immediate like teacher aid, extra attention, random labels, and then most grow out of it.
Which you didn't have probably growing up.
Well, are you talking about ADHD again now, or are you talking about autism?
All of it.
Any sort of learning disability, I
Yeah.
think that would require
kind of
extra special
all-encompassing.
attention.
Did you get distracted, James? Did you get distracted?
He's getting distracted right now.
Yeah.
Were you not paying attention to the conversation? Did your mind wander?
Depends if the conversation was any good.
Here, I have this pill that will change your life.
That might actually be on point. Let's get that. Actually, shockingly, James stumbled upon a valid point
Elon.
worthy of exploration. Let's get into it with story number one. So the headline in the New York Times Magazine is, "Have we been thinking about ADHD all wrong?" In the article, they start out talking to one of the doctors in the 1990s that pioneered the use of Ritalin and the diagnosis of ADHD at a time when it absolutely spiked in the United States. This is when the diagnoses and the treatment of ADHD truly began in the 90s. Now, it didn't. It started in the 1930s. That's when they first took kids and prescribed them what's called, I think it's benzaprine, which is a stimulant. It's a precursor drug, older version of what ultimately we ended up using when it comes to Ritalin and Adderall, a stimulant. And in the 1930s, the pioneers of this treatment recognized immediately that behavior improved literally within 24 hours of administering this drug to kids who had attention deficit disorder. Fast forward to the 1990s, and it's now a malady that is laid out in the American Psychiatry's DSM of diagnosable conditions. And at that time, this doctor's name is James Swanson. He worked at the University of California, Irvine. He specialized in attention disorders. He watched as the rise in prescribed drugs and diagnoses of ADD went up. They called it ADD in the beginning. And he thought no big deal of it. He thought, okay, well, our assumption is that about 3.3% of the population probably has an attention disorder. And so as he watched the prescriptions for these drugs and the diagnoses skyrocket, he wasn't concerned. Today, Dr. Swanson sits on a very different side of this, and that is fascinating. One of the pioneers in the 90s driving this forward is in this article talking about, I think we have gotten off on a very wrong track when it comes to ADHD. So if it was suspected to be 3.3% in the 1990s, I want to tell you where we are today. Last year, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention reported that 11.4% of American children have been diagnosed with ADHD. That's a record high. And the figure includes 15.5% of American adolescents. So teenagers, you're looking at 15% of them have been diagnosed with ADHD. This far outpaces what they originally suspected to be the national average of who would have an attention disorder. Now, why is it skyrocketing? Well, among the reasons is they, to this day, have no ability to medically diagnose ADHD. In other words, there are no biomarkers. It's not like diabetes. They don't run a test. They run a survey, and they have 6 markers of behavior that they ask parents to help understand. It's supposed to be over like a 6-month period. Is the kid's behavior consistently like this over a 6-month period? And does it survive multiple environments? Meaning, is he like that at school? Is he like that at home? Is he like that in sports? Is he like that all the time? Now, you can ask yourself, and the The point is, they are asking themselves today, how scientific is it, these 6 behavioral markers? Like, what if you have 5? Do you not have ADHD? What if you have 1 very severely? What if you have 8, but they're all very, minor behaviors? Like, what is a true scientific diagnosis of ADHD? As they go through this article, they start talking about the impact of not just diagnosing, but prescribing these kids stimulants. And so here's what they saw. Immediately, dating back to the 1930s and validated through the 90s and the 2000s, kids' behavior improved within 24 hours. Within 24 hours, they were capable of sitting still, paying attention, focused. I don't know if any of you have ever taken an Adderall or something like that. It's honestly, if we're being honest, it's incredible. You will lock in. You will study and care and like what you're reading about. You will, in a way that you're like, this is the driest stuff I've ever read, but man, I can't stop reading it. It improves behavior immediately. But what they start to notice is it improves behavior, but it doesn't improve academics. They have cohorts of kids that they have monitored over 20, 30 years in different geographic regions across the United States. And here's what they found. Better behavior for about 12 to 18 months. And then the effects begin to tail off. Academic improvement never was there. Behavioral improvement started in the beginning and then tailed off over time to where there was no distinguishable or measurable difference between the kids that were prescribed the stimulants and the kids like James, whose parents said, no, we're going to change environment. We're going to change how this kid is treated. They had 3 groups. 1 got stimulants. 1 got nothing. And 3rd got behavioral, environmental changes. Seriously, like James said, we're going to send them outside at recess. They're going to run around. We're going to try to find a better environment where they don't get so bored. Because what I started to notice is a lot of these kids, they interview these kids that took it and maybe like Dan, don't take it anymore. And one of the things they consistently found is the kids said, of those that don't take it anymore, well, I found what I was interested in. Like, I'm passionate about this, so I don't have trouble dedicating myself and seeing what I'm into and devoting focus and attention. I mean, it does raise questions about our mass education model, like sitting kids down for 8 hours a day, treating 30 kids in one classroom as though they're all the same. Is that how they all learn? Is that how they all find their passion? Is that how they all focus? And so many of the doctors that at one time believed that stimulants were the answer, today look back on it and go, maybe it's not stimulants. Maybe we need to start considering environmental changes to these kids, and it doesn't come without a cost. I want to share these stats. I held this back because I find this is astounding. Let's go to boys now. I told you 15% of American adolescents have been diagnosed with ADHD. 21%, 1 in 5, 14-year-old boys. 23, almost 1 in 4, 17-year-old boys. You're telling me 1 in 4 boys have ADHD? That defies common sense. It defies common sense. And this is what I wished I would have mentioned in having this conversation with Dr. Drew yesterday. There are negative effects. I've never heard this. Dan, I want to bring you guys back real quickly. James, do you know of any side effects to Adderall or Ritalin?
No.
Like consistent?
None.
I did.
Okay.
0.
What is it, Dan?
Yeah, racing thoughts, sleeplessness, restless leg, that kind of thing. There's sometimes I would just be sitting there like shaking like this. If I, then they.
And by the way, some kids said they feel real bad after it wears off. Like
just withdrawal.
Sort of like you have a
come down,
a serotonin drop.
I went cold turkey
drop,
once I went to college with it, and it was bad for a little while. But then it was fine.
Okay, but you didn't say this. This is in this article, man, and it seems to be medically confirmed, but no one talks about it because people would make a different choice. It stunts your growth.
I'm 6'3".
It stunts your growth. Well, you defied the odds. Maybe it'd have been 6'4".
Damn it!
You've been 6'6".
I always wanted to be
in the NBA.
6'7".
But think about these kids, like James said, like age 8, if he'd been putting on it. These kids at age 10, like they say it has a high chance of robbing you of an inch or 2 of height. It robs you of your growth.
Man.
How about that?
I would be like,
look,
5'9".
vanity is a powerful motivator in this world, right? Like, you say to some boys, hey, you're going to be shorter, but you're going to be calmer.
Nope.
I mean, I don't know if people, how about this? I don't think 1 in 5 and 1 in 4 are making this choice. I don't think 1 in 5 and 1 in 4 are so readily diagnosed with ADHD. Last point, Dr. Drew said this to me yesterday. He said, whether or not it's ADHD, he even said when it comes to autism, you need to consider there are other things. This is why we have to have no closed doors. Listen to Dr. Drew.
We are at once over-identifying this syndrome that we once sort of ignored, and we are both over-treating and simultaneously under-treating. And we are approaching it at the same time in the places we're using too much, as you said, with the psychostimulants. And there are other alternatives. And, I was always trained that without a proper diagnosis, a proper understanding of the biology, you can't have a proper treatment. And something I have known for a long time was that a good portion of the increase in ADHD that I was seeing was from childhood trauma. And childhood trauma is well associated with ADHD in childhood and adolescence. And not just trauma, but just adverse childhood experiences generally. And we are ignoring that. And I would argue that it is the over identifying of the syndrome and childhood trauma that is resulting in at least some of the numbers you're seeing there.
Okay, so that kind of went in one ear and out the other yesterday because I'm going to be honest with you why. When I hear the word trauma, I honestly hear white noise sometimes because I think trauma has become a cliched word that everyone seems to experience on every minute thing that happens to them in this life. However, I got an email right after the show from a doctor who I highly respect. He's in his 80s now. He's been doing this for a long time. Highly respect him. I know him. I've known him for a while. And he said, Will, that was an awesome discussion. Again, he's an MD. I was taken by the doctor's reference to childhood trauma. Do you know about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences? Lots of data now that more than 4 ACEs lead to all sorts of diseases and early deaths. Love to talk to you about ACEs and their possible link to autism. I came home, my wife's like, oh yeah, I know all about ACEs and what they're trying to start exploring that. Adverse childhood experiences cumulatively over time, what it does, I guess, not just to the emotional state of a child, but the physical state of a child. I just think it's time for an open and honest conversation about all of these things, especially when we look up and we say 1 in 4 of boys are being diagnosed with ADHD and prescription drugs are through the roof. For what it's worth, they now diagnose dogs with ADHD and give them stimulants, including anxiety as well. I mean, tell me that's not about money. Tell me that's not about big pharma. Dogs. That's where we are now, looking for pills. All right, let's take a quick break. Come back to talk to the boys from Ruthless when we come back on the Will Cain Show. I went way too long on ADHD, kept the boys from Ruthless waiting. I just said I'm sorry in the group chat. I sent it to the wrong group chat. I sent it to the TV show group chat. Now they're all saying, oh, so you do it everywhere you go. It's the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com. All right, with no further ado, let's bring in Josh Holmes and Comfortably Smug, the boys from Ruthless. I'm sorry I kept you waiting, and I only have so much time with you, so what a waste. What's up, fellas?
What's up, Will? I mean, I would have loved to jump in on the discussion with autism, ADD. It was a great conversation.
Yeah.
I like you even pulled your staff and you're like, come on, guys, let's talk about diagnosis.
I was wondering if Will was going to ask us to have some kind of like a HIPAA compliant medical history or maybe like a internet search history before we started here. Like something where we can dazzle.
I've gotten pretty comfortable with these guys.
Yeah, I can tell.
But yeah, it did occur to me, this is inappropriate that you're asking them this, Will. No, but Smug, you want to jump in? I want to hear. What do you have to say about ADHD and autism?
Well, I mean, I think it specifically caught my attention the context of teachers are starting to diagnose this. So now the public school experience is, a public school teacher going around being like, does your child have autism, ADD, or are they trans? Like that is kind of scary and different from what I remember school being like.
Let's keep it out of the classroom for sure.
No, you're absolutely right, though. I mean, I hear those stories anecdotally all the time that teachers will approach the parents and be like, hey, have you thought about having your kid tested? Have you thought about, I mean, like, everything is, and again, I'm not here to say that these things don't exist. Obviously, they exist. But I think we can obviously also say we might be like pulling and reaching for the bottle a little quickly. We might be looking for the diagnosis a little quickly. And look, if a teacher has a kid that's hard to deal with, I mean, yeah, they're turning. I'm not trying to make the teachers the bad guys, but but they're not doctors, and I don't know that it's appropriate to constantly be saying to a parent, "Hey, have you had your kid tested?"
Yeah. Well, I also think just on the autism thing is any parent there's this sort of latent fear of autism when you bring a child into the world, because it's, it's somehow going to make your kid different, right? Without its full understanding that because we haven't had discussions like this one of what a spectrum is and where people find themselves on it. And, parts of this that we've had for generations and never really understood the complexities of autism and anything else. And I think it's good to have an open discussion about it. I don't think that treating it as something that is just sort of like come out of thin air and inflicted, 1 in 32 kids that is productive, right? Because it doesn't,
it's not contagious, to your point.
It's not contagious, right? And it's not something where there's no value in the life of somebody who is somewhere on the spectrum, right? It's not like it shouldn't be some kind of a star or a silver line. It just is what it is. Helping kids get through that medical process is an important part. I've welcomed, frankly, a further discussion about it, not only in this program, but what RFK is doing. I think that stuff is important for parents who have this latent anxiety. I know my wife and I had it. I imagine almost everybody else does too.
Sure, absolutely. Speaking of the program, you guys just very, very recently, within the last 24 hours, I believe, sat down with the 4 commissioners of the big Power 4 conferences in college sports. By the way, nice job. Good get. And I presume they're in D.C. to talk about a potential settlement, the deal with the House and regulation of everything, NIL. I've had long discussions with sports professors about this. I think I've got my hands around it. But tell me what you learned in talking to all these commissioners.
Yeah, it was fascinating. I think off the jump, it was fascinating to us that the presidents of all of these individual conferences, the SEC, the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Big 12, the Power 4 of college athletics, were the ones that were leading the charge. We grew up with the NCAA being the all-powerful regulatory body of anything in college athletics. And now it's really on the conferences to try to sort this thing out. That's where the TV deals are done. That's where the money comes from. And so these guys have now taken an additional responsibility to help try to govern what is college athletics. And I think a couple of things that we learned that were really sort of interesting as it pertains to NIL in particular, the reason that they're up here talking to government officials about potential legislation is that states within their conference have begun the process of trying to advantage certain schools in many different ways. And there are 32 different sets of rules about what schools and collectives can do to offer contracts to athletes that attend the school. And there's no way to do that as a conference without inherently advantaging the teams that reside in states where they've taken some sort of legislative action. I'll give you one example. There was an example that they brought up in North Carolina where there was a bill recently introduced that would make a tax exemption for anybody who wanted to contribute to a university or a collective that was engaging athletes in NIL. Well, obviously, if it's a write-off in one state and it's not in another, there's an inherent advantage for the state that has that write-off. Another one, I don't remember if it was Mississippi or Alabama, something. There was a proposal to have athletes who get NIL contracts to be tax exempt in and of themselves, which is a ridiculous idea. But it's an idea that could take root and severely tilt the playing field for one team over another. They're looking for some just sort of federal preemption on this piece of it. And it gets more complicated for there. But that's like the
skeptical.
Upshot.
I'm skeptical. I go to you on the Smug. Like when everybody starts talking about the House and the legislative bodies jumping, I'm like, oh great. Like how's that going to make things better, right? But that being said, and having learned a lot about this, okay, I'll take one element of it. NIL is one element. Another is these schools are going to have a salary cap as a part of the House proposed settlement. $25 million per school. Well, okay, so we start there and then let the lawsuits roll in. Like the women athletes are going to sue immediately for their half of the money. And then the football players are going to countersue and be like, whoa, we bring in 95% of the money. Why are we getting 40% of it? And so the lawsuits roll in. So I think Congress does have to do something because they created part of the playing field with Title IX and others to say, to enable the incoming lawsuits.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing is, for a lot of folks, they didn't understand why would these presidents of these conferences be here asking for Congress to act. And it's exactly like you said. Congress has already acted before with Title IX, which creates a precedent, and that they have already created a framework of what college athletics looks like. So now we're in this new age where you've got NIL. You have to make that work into the existing framework, and there's so many moving pieces.
One of the things that I found most fascinating, and this is how I felt just as a fan, Will, I'm sure you can identify with this, but as your Supreme Court decision comes down, it's based on name, image, and likeness. That's nil, right? And athletes' ability to be compensated for jerseys sold with their number on it, right? For video games with their names in it, for shoe contracts, for those kind of things. Those contracts are entirely separate from what we're talking about with a house settlement or what universities can induce donors to basically give them to guarantee money for their athletes. Nil in and of itself is for an athlete that a company or somebody presumes they provide value in an advertising context, or because that athlete wears their gear or whatever. That was simply what it was. But of course, you get into college athletics, the big money that's involved in it, and this perverts it entirely, because your average left guard who's going to change your team, nobody knows the name of this guy, right? He's not going to sell shoes all over the universe. A critical component to every football team, but he's not the quarterback. And so it's now gotten into this weird spot where every single university is trying to supplement what nil, as it's classically defined, is with another guaranteed source of income for these athletes.
Every time you say this, the record scratches. Do you and your buddies call it nil? I've never before today heard anyone say the word nil.
Really?
Is that?
Yeah, I hear it pretty frequently as nil.
Yeah, we call it
I think
nil.
you've been out of sports for a while now, Will.
You think so? We're about to find out. Fellas,
we follow this stuff
2 days. Get in our ear.
granularly.
Yeah.
2 days. Get in our ear. Have you ever heard someone talk about NIL and call it nil?
Never once.
Unbelievable.
Not one time.
once.
James, you're a sports fan. You're 25 years old. You're not cooler than us, but we'll pretend like it for a moment.
Huh.
You're 25. Have you ever heard somebody call it nil?
Nah, it just sounds too kind of European soccer like.
Oh my God.
You're big city guys. I can tell you in the
Holmes,
South, we call it nil.
I'm your friend. I'm your friend. I'm telling you. You're out on a weird ledge here, okay? Every time you say it, I had trouble hearing the rest of what you were saying. I was like, why does he keep saying nil? I've never heard somebody say this before.
This is frankly insulting. I can't believe. And then to add insult to injury, we got a couple of guys in New York sitting up here telling me the way that we should refer to college athletics. I mean, unbelievable. Well, I'll take it from you.
I'm going to tell you this, Holmes. Find a clip anywhere of anyone in sports saying nil, and I will apologize.
Okay,
just one clip.
Challenge accepted.
Besides
accepted.
Besides you, okay, all right. Speaking of clips, before you guys go, you got to get out of here in just a moment. Smug, I want to get you in on this. So yesterday, here's a series of things that happened. This is Donald Trump taking a question from Caitlin Collins at CNN and saying this about CNN.
What you're doing with
On the
the
wheel.
border is remarkable. It has dropped, 95%? It's incredible.
Okay. As of this morning, 99%, 99.1% to be exact.
Why are those numbers not in the media?
Well, they get out with the fake news, like CNN over here doesn't want to put them out because they don't like putting out good numbers. They only like putting out because I think they hate our country, actually.
They hate our country. Okay, Dana Bash didn't like that, Smug. Here's what she said on CNN.
For the record, since we heard President Trump say in the Oval Office that CNN hates our country, CNN does not hate our country. That should go without saying. I've been here for 32 years, and I see a rhetorical device in him trying to say something for the.
Okay. So here's my quick take, Smug. CNN doesn't hate our country. They just love our country the same way a wife loves her husband who wants to change everything about him.
Such a good way to put it.
I mean, I will say that CNN just aired a show saying that the guy who murdered the CEO was what did Taylor say?
United Health.
Yeah, he's a very moral, upstanding guy.
Handsome.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
I mean, that's
Yes.
kind of a tough look to go into that.
It is a tough look. It is a tough look. I agree. I don't think they hate the country, but you could be excused for thinking that. I mean, look at the segments that they do. It's constantly rooting against values of sort of the middle of this country.
I mean, they've made it debatable. That in itself is like a problem. If it's like, well, it's up for debate.
Yeah. It's such a good point.
You know, I could be wrong, but you have to admit it's debatable, CNN.
Yeah, no, it's a point of a question that needs to be answered. And look, I know Dana Bash, and I know that she's a journalist. There are a handful of others over there who I think intend to do the right thing. But you got to look at the story selection that CNN does on a day-to-day basis. And I know you spent some time there, Will, but anytime you spend in and around CNN HQ, it's just a different cultural experience. Like they come at everything from a Republican administration standpoint with a critical eye of what you're doing to fail the people of the United States. Every time there's a Democratic administration, boy, I mean, there's a guy that's stumbling around who can't find the time of day for 4 years, and they never even asked the question. So
Right.
Look, it's a very partisan network. There's no question about that. I'll leave it to others to figure out how much they love or don't love about our country.
Okay, before you guys go, we have an update. Two-a-days. You have an update on NIL.
I do. So I looked it up, how to pronounce NIL for college athletics. And the acronym NIL is pronounced NIL. NILL.
Oh,
It
look what we have.
What does that mean? What does that mean you looked it up?
So
Well, it means
Google
they're
AI?
wrong, Will.
Google AI is telling us that it's pronounced NIL, not NIL.
I think the interesting thing is, could this be a sign that you're on the spectrum if it bothers your pronunciation?
There's medication for that, Will. Good news is there's medication
And I'm
for
taking
that.
it.
The thing is, Holmes, like if you were going around saying the U.S. beat Nicaragua 1-0, I'd at least be like, oh, he's trying to be fancy. He's not going to go 1-0. He's going 1-0. But
I
you're
would
doing
never
a
do that.
thing that is, yeah, I know. In this case, you're not trying to be cool. You're just doing your own thing. I've literally never heard anyone else. And I guess I can respect that. Do your own thing, man. Did you say it to the commissioners?
There
Did
was
you say
no
nil
danger.
to the commissioners?
Wait, say that again.
Did you use the word nil when talking to the Power 4 conference
Good
commissioners?
question.
Oh, I think we did, yeah. And I think they used it back.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I got to rewatch it. But if I find that one of them said this, Will, I'm sending it directly.
Okay.
And I don't care if you're in the middle of
Okay.
your 4:00 show or
Let's
not.
do this
I'm
publicly.
sending
Let's do
it to
this
you with
publicly.
audio on.
Put it on X. I may even put it on TV. Send it to me. We're doing this publicly. By the way, you guys can go check the tape for yourself. Go to the Ruthless variety program, download it, Spotify, Apple, wherever, and listen to their interview with the Power 4 presidents of the conferences. You want to hear that conversation. Great get. Good job. Thanks, guys, for hanging out with me today.
Very kind,
Thank you
Will.
so
You are the
much.
best.
All right, there they go. Comfortably Smug and Josh Holmes. Fellas, come back in here real quick. Okay, we said goodbye to them. They left the room, okay? Two-a-days. Tinfoil. James. Nobody says nil, right?
No.
Come on, you have my back on this.
I do. You're right. It's insane.
Who says nil?
No.
Got the
Tinfoil. Have
answer.
you ever heard somebody say nil? You got to unmute yourself, Tinfoil. It's a broadcast.
Muted.
That was me.
Oh, come on,
I
Dan.
didn't want him to
Sabotage
talk.
me.
Yeah, I did.
Sabotage. Now I look like a,
Have you,
I don't know.
Patrick? Have you heard anyone say that before?
I haven't heard it used, but I also don't know how to pronounce words very well. I read things and I
Well-
mispronounce words all the time.
Me too. So I'm gonna say it. I'm giving you that humility. I'm bad at pronouncing things, but I'm 95% sure that I've only ever heard NIL. All right. We got to go. We got to take a break because we got New York Yankees legend David Wells coming up in just a moment on the Will Cain Show. Did Babe Ruth call his shot? Was he taunting or pointing? Forecasting what he was about to do. It's the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel, on the Fox News Facebook page. Hit subscribe at Apple or on Spotify. David Wells is a former New York Yankees and Major League Baseball starting pitcher. He's featured in the new Fox Nation special, Did Babe Ruth Call His Shot? And David Wells joins me now. What's up, David?
Good, Will. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. Just settle this debate. You're a big sports guy. You know college sports. Have you ever heard someone say name, image, and likeness and say the word nil, or have you only heard people say NIL?
NIL.
See, thank you.
You're
Okay.
welcome. I don't know what nil. Nil could be nil in a card game or whatever. It's it's NIL.
Yeah, you bid nil in spades. You
There
know,
you
that's
go.
that's when you say the word nil. You don't even say it in reference to soccer because you're not European. You say zero. Nil is about cards. That's the only application I've ever used nil, I believe. All right,
100%.
David, you did this news special. You're in this thing with Fox Nation. I want to start here. Let's talk about Babe Ruth. You going to answer the question for us or make us watch the series? Did
No.
call
I'll answer
his
it.
shot?
I'll just fast forward to the to the answer.
Okay, cool. Did he call a
He
shot?
called it. He called it. I mean, you see all the footage. You've heard all the stories, but footage really doesn't lie. It's a matter of who believes it, who doesn't. I believe it. I'm a historian. I love the game, but from what I've seen, from everything, every angle and all that, from him chirping at the guys in the dugout against the Cubs to him and then pointing the bat. And yeah, but you know what? Charlie Root should have said something years ago about that. I don't know if he did or he didn't, but in my eyes, he called it 100%. And that's the Babe Ruth story for you.
So you've got 3 episodes, which you're featured in it. Nick Swisher, another former Yankees, in there as well. And you guys investigate this. It says you also investigate an investigation of this stature deserves an episode into itself. So you guys deep dive, bring in the evidence. Like, what kind of evidence can you marshal that far back? I think you just pointed to testimony from some old timers, but what can you use to find out this is what he did?
Well, in the series, you'll see different things from him, chirping, obviously, like I just said, but pointing the bat. I mean, if that doesn't give you, I've in my career, I've never seen a guy point the bat, because if he pointed the bat, he's going to get one in his earlobe, just in this time of age. But I mean, now probably not. But back when I played and before I played, you probably would. But so to me, it's I'm just going off of what I've seen, what I've heard, and what I believe in, and just knowing that I've talked to people who've known. I've talked to Yogi Berra about Babe Ruth. He met Babe Ruth, and people, that's his daughter. So to me, it's it's legit. I there's no other way I could put it. It's legit, and but there's those people out there who don't believe it, but you know what? That's them, and I believe it, and 100%. I'm not even going to go off that script.
Take me back to that moment, because this is a thing that exists. What is that saying? My guys on my show talk about it sometime. It's the effect where I think I know something that happened, but only because I've seen and it's been repeated to me enough. Like, I don't know that I've actually seen the moment of Babe Ruth pointing out there. I may have seen a still shot. You know what affects the moment also is the my guys tell me it's called the Mandela effect. I'm not sure why it's called that, but it's also when movies become real life in your mind. And that's part of this. I think The Natural affects me. Didn't in The Natural he point and then he took a wild pitch or something and then he pointed again? He pointed multiple times and one at bat in The Natural, I believe.
No, he did.
Did Babe Ruth point multiple times in one at bat, or was it one time? Take me back to the moment. How did it unfold?
I think just watching the footage of him going in there, and then the Cubs guys are chirping at him and all that, and he's looking at him and he's pointing, and then all of a sudden he's pointing at the plate. He just keeps it there. Charlie Root throws the pitch, and boom, the rest is history. So you just got to go on the motions. You saw, like you said, you saw the still shot, but when you watch the actual footage, he's putting his bat out there. He's holding it out there.
Right.
Yeah. And so to me, that's proof enough for me. It really is. I know you said
you're a historian. Do you know, hey, how big was Babe Ruth? What was he?
I think he was 6'3", 6'2", 6'3". Pretty round.
Okay.
Pretty round, but he had a big old head, because when I wore the hat and in the game in '97, I believe it was, I had to put some had to put some stuff in the hat so it would fit all right because he had a big old noggin, and I was only 7 1/4. Yeah.
You're 7 1/4. What do you think he was? 7 5/8. What was he?
Probably close to 7 5/8, 7.5. Probably 7.5.
Yeah.
Little, I think it was about 7.5, maybe a little bit more. But the hat shrunk when I had it. The hat shrunk a little bit, but I had to put some paper or whatever I put in it, and and then it fit all right. But I'm glad I got to do it. I got.
What do you think? So that's really cool, by the way. You got to wear that hat. That's really cool. 6'3", round. What do you think? Like, if you had to pick a modern day player who resembled Babe Ruth physically, who is that?
Jabba Chamberlain.
Is that like David Ortiz?
No, Jabba Chamberlain. He was a pitcher, but he I think he suited up one time and he kind of had the look. I suited up in a Babe Ruth uniform, which I still have, but they try to doctor you up. They could do anything for you in the movies. You can look like anybody, but no, I mean, if you're going to look at guys like that, David Ortiz, he had the same because he was a big guy, but David wasn't fat. He was just, he was muscle. I think it was a good beer muscle or something. See those guys that drink a lot of beer and it's just a tight thing, but David Ortiz wasn't fat. I was.
What do you, what do you, by the way, David? What in your playing days? In your playing days, what were you clocking in at?
What year? It just depends. I changed. I changed, but when I was in Toronto, I think in 1999 and 2000, when I went back to Toronto, I think I got up to like 280, 275, 280. And then when I was back with the Yankees, I was down to 240 because Steinbrenner had that weight class on me, so I had to stay under that to make my money. So it was a lot of money, but if I didn't do it, that's a lot of money lost. So I had to bust my ass to get to where he wanted me to be.
Incentive is a hell of a motivation, isn't it? What did that do, by the way? What kind of motivation was that? Did you have to just diet, start eating
I
right
mean, I
food?
eat good
like, what'd you do?
But I eat good anyways, but it's like in baseball, you got night games, and then you have after the game, you have the spread, you're hungry or whatever, and then you go out and you start drinking, and then you find a hot dog stand or a diner or something, and you just crush. And that's what you do. I mean, but it didn't matter because you know what? Bigger. I pitched. I won the most games in my career at the heaviest weight I was. I won 20 games in 2000, and I think I was like 275, 280. So it didn't really matter to me.
Do you think it could even have helped? I talked about. I have a buddy.
Don't be a Jim Palmer on
baseball.
me. Jim Palmer told me that. And he says if I would have been thinner, I would have won a lot more games. That's eyewash to me.
Well, it's fascinating. I have a buddy that played baseball at least through college, and then a lot of his teammates went on to play professionally, and some of them in the majors. And the body types on pitchers it's all over the place. It's like trying to say, oh, you look like a Navy SEAL. There's no such thing. Like there's short ones, tall ones, every version of a Navy SEAL. But I mean, we had pitchers. I went to Pepperdine, pretty good baseball program. We had guys that were 6'5" and skinny, looked like Randy Johnson. We got guys that are short and stout. I mean, it's all over the map.
It is. It doesn't matter what you are. I mean, but, as later in my career, they wanted everyone. They started changing the foods in the clubhouse. They wanted you to have more nutrition, better nutrition, take away all the sweets and all that kind of stuff. But, it's just guys are going to go out and do it anyways. They're going to have, they're going to eat what they want. But, all shapes. You look at Bartolo Colon. He was a big boy. Mickey Lolich, he was a big boy towards the end of his career, but he pitched well. So there's a lot of guys that can handle that. I was still fast. I could still fill my position. I could, I could still run. I wasn't hindered by anything like that. And, I was a pretty good athlete. I mean, at 240, 250 pounds, I was still playing basketball and slam dunking. So to me, it was just, it just depends on each individual.
I think we got onto this because we were talking about Babe Ruth's size. I do want to ask you a couple quick questions about the modern game. So what do you think, first of all, and you've probably been asked this a million times, but not by me. What do you think of the pitch clock?
Can't stand it. I believe that, the way they put this is the game is there 9 innings. If you don't want to stay, then leave. You have that right. It's just everything. They're trying to change the game. I don't know what Manfred's thinking about. I don't like the guy. I had a lot of run-ins with him when I was playing, but to put the pitch clock out there and force these guys to pitch, and it could be in a crucial situation where, you run out of time and it's ball 4 and the run scores. To me, that just doesn't work. And to me, I looked at it, you're going to blow guys' arms out because they're rushing themselves instead of taking it. I work quick. There's a way to work quick, but then there's guys like Brad Penny, who was a great pitcher, but he was slow. Storm Davis, a lot of these guys, we call them human rain delays, but they got the job done. So they don't need that pitch clock.
Well, that's actually a question I wanted to ask you as well. So I think the pitch clock's too new to be the reason or the answer to this question.
Mm-hmm.
But look, growing up, I guess I kind of grew up not unlike you in that I'm going to call it that Nolan Ryan mindset. Like, what are you talking about pitch counts? Like, pitch until you're done. We're not worried about how many pitches you've thrown.
Right.
And today, we're in an age where you've got 6, maybe 7 starters. So you've got longer rests. You've got shorter outings. And yet every time I turn around, I see one of my favorite pitchers on my team getting Tommy John or something. It's like we're throwing less and injured more. How do you explain that?
That's because they don't. I've talked to a lot of guys in the minor leagues over the years, and they don't let them play long toss. To me, long toss was essential because it stretches your arm out. You get a dead period during the season, sometimes. Not everybody does, but some guys do. So you want to keep that arm extended. So you play a lot of long toss. I played it every day. That's why I had a rubber arm, and to me, it was good. But when you're short and you have the pitch counts, these guys are trying to throw as many pitches as hard as they can, and because they know their time is limited. So that's going to blow their arm out, and they're going to mess up. They're going to go against the grain somehow, some way on a pitch. It's not going to be right. And then there's a little tweak, and there's Tommy John, there's rotator cuff, there's something like that. The greatest manager in the world to me was Sparky Anderson. And the biggest inspiration that he gave me every 5 days, seeing the 9th inning kid, or see you after the 9th inning kid. That's what Sparky Anderson would tell me. I pitched 152 pitches in one game, and I still couldn't get the third out. I was just like, he came out and got me. He was yelling at me. He was giving me the business. And, and I did it 2 games in a row where I couldn't get the third out, and I had over, 150 pitches. So, but the next day I went out and played long toss. That was good.
Who's your favorite pitcher today to watch or appreciate? Just who you find yourself rooting for and liking?
I liked Max Scherzer. I liked Verlander. I don't know if they're hurt, still playing, because I haven't watched a game in like 5 years. But
really,
yeah. I mean, it's. I mean, I'll get bits and pieces here and there, but I haven't literally watched the full game. And but Kershaw, I like him. He's a lefty. He's a good kid. He's got a lot of he's an older pitcher now, so he's pitching smart. That's what you do when you lose your velocity. You learn how to pitch smart, and that's what he does. So Kershaw is a good one.
Yeah, all 3 of those guys, by the way, still playing. All 3 Warriors. To their career. Okay, lastly, what do you think about torpedo bats?
I think they're doing everything to make the offense better and the pitching weaker. They moved in parks when I was still playing. Guys were complaining. I pitched the first game at Petco Park in 2004, and I remember Ryan Klesko coming. He hit 3 bombs. I mean, they should have been 20 rows deep, and they were warning track power. And then one of the guys on the Dodgers, a pitcher, hit a home run, and Klesko was furious. So they moved him in, and now they're changing the bats. They're doing this. So I just think they want more offense. I think that's what the fans want. But to me, I'd love to see a 1-0 game. I'm pitching. I'm biased, obviously, but I just want to see a good game. And with Goose or Brett with George Brett and Goose doing the with the Pine Talk. So there's a lot of things that they're trying to eliminate, and you know what, they might as well just put no seams on the baseball for the pitchers, and then you're going to have a hell of an offensive game.
Yeah. All right. Finally, back to this Babe Ruth thing. So we get to find out it's a 3-part series investigation into that at bat. Did Babe Ruth call his shot? What was your favorite thing to learn about this? I mean, I'm assuming you've worn his uniform. You're a Yankee. At some level, you're a big fan, I assume, of Babe Ruth. So what did you like about doing this and learning all about this moment?
It's just because I did so much reading and just reports on Babe Ruth as a little kid going through school, and just watching the doc. And that's why I loved the Yankees so much as a little kid, because of him. And then being a Padre fan, growing up in San Diego, and then, and loving the Yankees. And then when I got a little older, Ron Guidry became my favorite pitcher, and Steve Carlton, because they're both lefties. I didn't have the mechanics as him, but so Babe Ruth just really, just stayed with me all these years, and to learn more and more and read up about him and just hear the great stories and the bad stories that he did. I mean, if I don't know what Joe Torre would do nowadays if he had Babe Ruth, when we were playing, because he was a man of his own destiny, and he did whatever he wanted. And I tried to emulate that a little bit. I think that's probably why, but that's why Babe Ruth was just so great, because no matter what he did, he went out on the field and he meant business. When he got between the lines, he did what he had to do. And obviously, the history shows that. So that's why he's the greatest, the figure of all time. Maybe not the greatest baseball player of all time, but he's the greatest inspiration, and of that era. He was the best. But then new eras come up, because then you got Hank Aaron, who outdid him, and he was one hell of a player too.
Right, an inspiration to David Wells on and off the field. That's good 100%. Stuff.
Anymore though, not anymore.
All right, did Babe Ruth call his shot? It's available now on Fox Nation. It features David, Nick Swisher, and others in looking into this infamous moment here with Babe Ruth. Thank you so much, David. Great to talk to you. Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Will, thank you very much. Big fan of yours as well. So maybe I'll meet you in person someday. It'd be great.
I hope so. Yeah. Let me know if you're in Dallas. Come down on the set, hang out on the Will Cain Show. Thank you, David.
That would be awesome. I'll get there.
Okay, good deal. There he goes, David Wells. Legend, Major League Baseball pitcher. Okay, the challenge is on for Josh Holmes to find me one clip of somebody in sports in the real world saying nil. We'll find out if he can do so before this day is over. But that's going to do it for us today. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place here for the Will Cain Show.